So here we are moving into session 3. So it's going pretty quickly so far. We've covered 3 chapters of part 1 so far, plus the introduction. The next 2 we're going to do will just be 1 chapter at a time. So the videos may be a little less time. So that's what I'm working toward. There's no sense in me covering all, what's in a chapter when you're about to read it. So I just want to reinforce some ideas or maybe give some new thoughts. So that's the plan. Let me think here. We have just come out of your walking companion, and one little statement or 2 little statements that I made was talking about how I had fallen away and returned, and how it took years for my healing and restoration. I even used the terms of how it was weeding in my garden, how the gardener was working with me to weed my garden. So I love that imagery, and that's something that has hung around really for years. Even when I garden now, I kind of see so much imagery in how weeds are so representative and symbolic of our sin. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little something from page 30, and I have a lot of jumping around I want to do, a lot of different, I've got a lot of notes, and I kind of today want to make sure that I make some of these points and don't miss anything. I find myself at times after a video that I'm like, I wish I would have said that, and I really don't want to go back and re-record the whole thing. I'm finding it super frustrating to get, say, 10 or 15 minutes in and then realize that, let's say my like it has been, my phone will ring or I get an email or whatever. So I'm just gonna let it roll, and if I need to stop today and keep going, I will. But I do want to make a few of these points. Okay, I'll read here on page 30. I am tempted to share all the dreadful decisions I've made in life, all the wrong choices that labeled me chief among sinners. That isn't what this book is about. You know what it looks like to try and get your needs met by the world. I'm seeing that if I leave my sin a little more undefined, it may make it easier for you to kind of insert your name here. You just talk about your sins, and because if you're comparing yourself with my sins, they may look better or worse, and that's not what this is all about. If you've walked any time in this Christian faith, I hope you've learned this, that as my granny would say it this way, a sin is a sin is a sin. We can't be comparing our sins and thinking that we're better than some or worse than others, because all sin is us falling short of God's best for us. So maybe it being less defined will help you in that. You have your own messy. My messy was one thing. You have your own messy, and I don't think any of us are surprised by the messiness of others. But anyway, messy. This is a note I've gotten for myself here. Messy sets the stage for the deepest and truest love you will ever know. Let's turn to to Luke 7:47, and I will read that for us. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. There's a few points I want to make based on this particular passage, and I'll start with this: is that I've been forgiven much. You've been forgiven much, even if you don't see it in those terms right now. You may have a really clean life, which is something we'll kind of we'll take off on that path here in a few minutes. But you have been forgiven much. Maybe that's why his love for me was so staggering. It is still so staggering that he would allow me to return into relationship with him after all I had done, and he loved me anyway. Don't you love that song? He loves me anyway. I love that song because it's so symbolic of my journey with him, the fact that I've done everything wrong, and yet he loves me anyway. So I'm not sure which I feel more sorry for, the dirty girls like me or the clean girls who are out there who've just done it all right. I commend you for the fact that you maybe waited before marriage, or you've just made so many great decisions that your life is pretty tidy. I don't know which I feel more sorry for, because someone like me, we have this ability to see, I use the word again, the staggering of love that God can have for the worst of us. And so that makes us love much. It says here, for she loved much. But then it goes on to say, but he who is forgiven little loves little. You have your work cut out for you if you've got this clean and tidy life, because it's going to be a little more difficult. That's probably an understatement. It may be a lot more difficult for his love to be as penetrating for you as it has been for me, because you don't feel the need to or maybe you don't see it as staggering as I've seen it. I hope that makes sense. But if you do live that clean life, you're going to have to analyze that part of yourself. Now let's go back over to the messy girls. Let's go back to for so many years of my life, I considered myself a dirty girl. That's just how I saw in terms from childhood up, that I was dirty and they were all clean. I assumed all these other girls were nice and clean and tidy, and I was this dirty, messy girl. So, but there's something about failure and restoration going into an intimate place with the Lord. There's something about that, the fact that I brought my worst, I brought my dirtiness before him, and I keep using the phrase, he loved me anyway. That should blow us all away. So when you can expose your worst before him, when you can do that in an intimate place with him and you're loved anyway, that will grow your relationship. That will allow you to see him pouring out his love on you in ways that is going to blow your mind, which will lead to your love growing for him in return. I'm going to share a little bit about exposing myself at one stage of my journey. I mentioned in the introduction how I had been in these two conferences, the Jesus Loves Me conference, and I did one at my former home church, and I did one at a sister church. And what the Lord had prompted me to do was to expose the worst of myself. And it wasn't just to show the worst of me. The ultimate goal was to underscore the best of him. And that's exactly what took place. I went into this with boldness. I shared things about myself that were super ugly. I actually kept saying, you get the National Enquirer version of my history. Obviously, I didn't scratch even the surface of all I've done wrong, because of course we all had to go home at some point. But I just laid bare so many of my ugliest sins before this group of women. And at the time, I don't know that I really understood what I was doing and what the Lord was accomplishing in me through this. But what he showed me after the fact was that anything in darkness has a tremendous power over you. And because I've been called to use my voice or use my hands or whatever to further the kingdom and to reach people, I realized that because of my past sins, so often I remained quiet. I would think, well, if they knew the worst of me, then they wouldn't receive from me. I think I've shared that in another session, but it kept me quiet. So exposing myself before the enemy could expose me, you know what? It was like I got ahead of the ball game. He didn't have anything to hold over me anymore. So now if someone says to you, did you hear what Lisa Heaton did? What you can say is, you know what? She did the fun stuff 4 or 5 times. You can say she did these things, but isn't God great? It's never to highlight my worst, as I said. It's to underscore his best. And some of my favorite stories in the Bible are when God uses the worst and the weakest people. He uses them not in spite of what they've done or how they failed him. He uses them because of it. He grows them up through their worst. And they become people who are much more devoted. They're more like me, where it says here, for those who've been forgiven much, love much. They've gone through that same transformation. There was true transformation in their lives from the weakest and the worst to the one that God would use. So I am not in any way suggesting you go expose your worst, because I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty tough-skinned. There's no telling what kind of comments were made about me afterward. And I got to, like this, we did a Friday night and a Saturday at my church. And then Sunday morning, I knew some people would look at me differently. I knew that, but I also know that so many people came to me during the time of the conference, and they even came to me the next day or maybe a week later and said, I've done the same thing and I've dealt with the same burden. And so I know doing that was the right thing. And I am tough-skinned, and I can handle whatever repercussions that might put on my shoulders. But for you, I am recommending you go expose yourself in your worst and your messy, in your intimate relationship with Jesus. There is something about him loving you anyway that will absolutely fill you with the love that he has for you. You'll see through your worst failures, and he loves you anyway. But you've got to be open, and you've got to be honest, and you've got to step in to what I keep saying is this intimate relationship, or your intimate possession, where you are his and he is yours. There's nothing off limits that you can't discuss. So I'm asking you please to go and begin that process and allow him to begin the process of healing and restoration that you need. There's something so beautiful of the love you will have for him as you come through that season, and you will finally begin to really own the love he has for you. It's got to become your intimate possession. So I'm going to share a little something from one of the book pages on page 32. I think I'm just over a couple of pages from where I was. That during the time when I was really working with him on the restoration and the healing, and I would have to ask myself, what is it that got me so off track? And there was one day I was listening to a song that I had heard countless times. It was one of my favorite songs by 10th Avenue North, and it's called By Your Side. And the exact phrase is that one of the lines says, "Why are you looking for love? Why are you still searching as if I'm not enough?" And that clued me in. That was my problem all along, because I was really trying to walk with him, and I really wanted to have my life in order. I really wanted to be the clean girl. I wanted to do things right. So why did I still fall? That was the key. That was the answer, is because truthfully, that was the ultimate deception by the serpent that he was feeding me. He was telling me that Jesus wasn't enough, and I believed Jesus wasn't enough. As a matter of fact, I thought I needed Jesus plus romantic love. And you may feel the same. Or you may need Jesus plus your kids, and you need Jesus plus your ministry, Jesus plus your career. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Jesus is not just enough. He is everything. And if you do not experience that everything emotion with him, then you are missing out on something that he has for you. And so this journey for you, I'm going to hit hold for just 1 minute because I've got this little pup in my lap trying to struggle to get out. I'm going to hit hold for just a moment and come right back. Okay, so we're back from on hold. We're going to have to roll with how we have to do things with this little girl. But anyway, so what I was saying is that he has to become your enough. He has to become your everything. So back to the Jesus Loves Me conference. One of the beautiful aspects of that conference was, rather than me continually telling all the wrong, all the bad I had done, I was able to highlight so much of the good in the relationship. And so I've got these, what I call stones of remembrance, and they are based on the verses in Joshua where it's talking about setting up stones so your children will remember. And I have begun over the years, and I haven't been doing it lately, but I have collected stones over the years. Well, for this conference, we pulled together some of those stones, and someone actually wrote some of the things like, okay, I know I've shared early in, this is the biggest one, but early in the book about beloved. Okay, that's one of the stones. That's one of the moments of intimate love that I've known with God that solidified his love for me, where he just kept calling me beloved, beloved. I shared that story. So there's one of them. There are, enough. I just shared the season about enough. And I've got a little stone that it remind me that when I feel like I need him plus anything else, then that's when I'm going to get off track, because he is enough. There's another, let me see here. Sorry, this is loud. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this is the skunk story. And as you get later in the book, you're going to come across this skunk story. I would love at some point to do the stone series and do some videos where I just go through each one of these in individual videos and tell a little story. I love this. The skunk story. All right, when I shared a story that I'll share with you in the book, and that was on Friday night at the conference. And when I walked in the next morning, is because I shared that story just off the top of my head. I didn't have a stone for it, and I didn't plan on it. But when I walked in the next morning, in my chair up on the stage, there was this skunk stone. Someone went home that night, got this stone, and painted this little skunk on there. This was one of my bigger stories. This is what I feel is just a miracle, where I was delivered from drinking. And so you'll have to read farther into the book to find out what this little skunk represents. But all this to say is that an event, a couple of days event, and then another event where I did this something very similar at another church, that could have all been so demoralizing for me and so painful for me. But because God led me to share these stories, and people got so excited about the stories, it was very therapeutic for me, because instead of remembering all the wrong that I had done as I told about it, I was able to also share these stones and the stories of how God was right there in my midst, constantly, over and over, doing these little and big things for me. Okay, a couple more I'm going to pull out. And all right, just ran across this one. There's my little garden implements. So that was the weeding process. This one, I haven't thought about this one in a long time. It says, heart you more, love you more. I shared this story at the conference, that it was a time I was working on a fiction book, and there are these two characters. It's a love triangle. We like this, girls like the love triangles. Anyway, I was just thinking one day about how both men loved her so equally and so well, yet so different. I mean, both had a passionate kind of love, but their love for her differed. And I actually, it just crossed my mind one day. I thought, I don't think I've ever been loved like that, or I don't think I've been loved that much, that deeply. And I just heard this phrase, or I just felt this prompting of God say, I love you more. I was seeing that human love. Once again, see that we're going to almost always trip over the same rock. We know the rock's there, and we're going to go by it, and we're going to still trip over that same rock at times. But because I have a history of desiring human love, it's still an Achilles heel, I guess, where the serpent comes sometimes and strikes. It just crossed my mind. I wish I could be loved like that. But God, Jesus, showed me that He loved me more. And the way in which He did, and this is going to sound weird, but I am a writer, and I do so much with imagery in my head. It's like I could see the fact that His outstretched hands going to the cross for me, and in my mind, knowing He would be willing to do that, and He would be willing to die for me. That was the proof that He loved me more. So I wrote that stone, because that was something, that phrase, love you more. Whenever I hear that phrase, I'm going to equate that where He loves me more than anyone could ever possibly love me in a human sense. So I share all those stories to reinforce this idea that even when I was living and exposing my worst to Him, now this is before the conference, this is the journey we were going through at the same time. This was simultaneous. I didn't get all cleaned up and then Him come and do all these beautiful, sweet things for me. No, it was along the journey that He was pouring out and wooing. And there's a story I believe I share in the book where He gave me flowers. He wooed me and He pursued me. How could I not see that love, and how could I not love Him in return? So I don't really have a way to wrap this up today, other than to say I cannot encourage you enough to step into your own intimate relationship and know it's there. I hope you believe me. And I don't have the quote here with me, so I don't want to do it damage, but in Oswald Chambers, there's a day he says that you can never give another person what you have, but you can give them the desire for it. That's what I long to do. I want to be contagious. I want to share stories of what it really has looked like in my journey walking with Jesus. It can be your same kind of journey. Yours may look a little different, as we learned in the last chapter, that He's going to meet your needs individual to you, just like he tailors the way he approaches me, and the way he conducts Himself with me. I feel it's meeting my needs to where He will meet your needs. Anyway, that was a little convoluted, but all that to say is that you can have this same kind of intimate relationship with Him, and it'll look exactly like it needs to look for you. I'm challenging you to go all in this intimate relationship. Take this week and truly begin a pursuit of the one who is pursuing you. So we will end with that, and I'll have an assignment established for you soon, put on the website next to the Session 3 tab. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, you are welcome to contact me at lisa@lisaheatonbooks.com. I hope I've caught up with everything, and if not, I will maybe do an insert here at the end of the video. So you have a blessed day.